everybody to East Dundee's special meeting, Board of Trustees, dated Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. I've got 5:30. Franco, will you take the roll?
Trustee Britton.
Here.
Trustee Saviano.
Here.
Trustee Treiber.
Here.
Trustee Sauter.
Here.
Trustee Mahoney.
Here.
Trustee Kunze.
Present. Great. If you'll rise with me for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. All right, that take us to public comment. I understand we have a couple of people who'd like to address the board.
Yes, first
Who's
one.
first?
Maurice Martin.
Maurice.
Good evening. First of all, congratulations on the election. Trustee Sauter, Treiber, Kunz, and Kathleen Mahoney. Looking forward to this board for more years. Thank you for all the effort that you put into the moth issue and preparation and education and research time, and your presence with our village group was very helpful. I won't make any other comments tonight, but thank you for that. And we have some subject matter experts in the room. If there's something during the discussion that you'd like our help with, thank you very much.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, next.
Next is Ben Douglas Gay.
Good afternoon. I go by Doug.
Doug.
I spoke at the last meeting against the spraying for these gypsy moths, and I just thought I'd say a few things. I would presume that in the last week or so since then that you've had some experts look at the situation in more detail, and hopefully we'll hear from them. I've done a little just reading. I'm not an expert on it, but I read that typically oak trees have to have about 3 years of total defoliation before it kills them. And as I recall from last meeting, someone, one of the experts here, said something about these trees had not yet been fully defoliated that are here. So I was kind of curious about that. Secondly, we talk about an area of East Dundee to be sprayed. And I'd kind of like to see a map to see where it's going to be, so I have an understanding of where the spraying will be done. So if you've got that, I'd appreciate it. And again, I'd like any comments on any other methods that have been considered, like, for example, this wrapping something around it and putting the sticky stuff on and so forth. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next. Do we have one more?
Yes, June Keebler.
Hi, I spoke last time as well in defense of the insects. And I just have a little story to tell you. And I hope it will help you to understand that how connected all of these things are. In our township, we have a very rare orchid. It's state endangered, federally threatened. It's pollinated by a sphinx moth. I can't tell you the life history of that sphinx moth. It's quite, it hasn't been studied a tremendous amount. And so even though we've been working on the eastern prairie finch orchid for 30 years to try and recover it, we know that the sphinx moth visits this orchid very rarely. So we are having people pollinate this orchid so that we can get seed sources for them and expand the populations. And we've been very successful at that. But we know that the hawk moth visits, or the sphinx moth, both names. Some people confuse them with the hummingbird moth, but it's not quite the same. We know that the moth lives from 10 to 30 days. This rare orchid blooms the end of June. And so most certainly, since this moth pollinates the orchid, he is a caterpillar in May. So I hope you'll give careful understanding. This is just one example of the 500 plus caterpillars that live in our woods and our prairies. And aerial spraying is especially tough because it gets every layer. that spray doesn't stay in the top layer. It goes to the understory trees and the understory plants as well. So even if a milkweed happens to be in the area, spraying the area is going to get that milkweed as well. And so you are still putting monarchs at risk as well, I believe full-heartedly. So I appreciate your hearing me. I appreciate all the effort you've gone to. Appreciate everyone's comments. And I know you've done a lot of research, and I'm just speaking very personally. I've been working with this orchid for 30 years, so thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, was there anybody else who'd like to address the board? Dave?
Thank you. I am not an expert as well, but I do represent a local government agency in the Dundee Township Park District.
Would you like
My
to
name's
introduce-
Dave
thank you.
Peterson.
Thank you.
I'm the executive director there, and I had the opportunity to go around last week the village of East Dundee with several residents, one of them my board president, just to see some examples of what you're faced with. We were faced with something of an infestation back in 2009 and 10 at our Randall Oaks Park, which is our biggest park, our most used park by far, and we have a lot of beautiful oak trees, several hundred years old, and a lot of other trees as well. And I wasn't here at the time, I left before then, and now I've come back, but I have talked with the staff enough, and there was a severe threat we felt to take some measures of mitigation to make sure that there was so many eggs and so many droppings coming down, it seemed like rain. They said it felt like rain. The staff and the board made some decisions at that time to do 2 aerial sprayings in 2009 in the spring, and then at that same park they did 2 more sprayings in 2010 at that same park. And I just wanted you to know from the perspective of the number of eggs and all the droppings coming down, that we never had any issues after 2010. So those 2 sets of 2 aerial sprayings that we did in 2009 and 10, BTK, did resolve the problem. But I'll also let you know we've never had issues at other parks as well, and we have 42 parks throughout the park district. And the reason we know that is when we do tree trimmings and prunings, the outsourced company always lets us know if there's any disease or situations like this. And we've been very fortunate not to have any of these situations, but just back in 2009 and 10. So as a local government, I just wanted you to know that I support sharing that with you because I want to give you some information to help you make an informed decision.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, would you like?
Well, I don't really have any.
Just give us your name and address.
I'm Ruth Cleveland, and I've been a resident of East Dundee for 45 years. And we have one very large oak, very old oak, and my neighbor has 2 oaks across the street, and I noticed these caterpillars, and I had them identified as spongy moth. And we didn't have too many on our property, but my neighbor did. And like they said, the droppings, the leaf mulch, and that coming down from the trees, it was pretty severe. Her trees were partially defoliated. And my tree was okay this year, but I killed dozens of the female moths. And I took out as many egg masses as I could, but I'm looking up in my oak, and there's just like one branch with 12 egg masses. And I live in that section B that might not be sprayed, but I really would appreciate some help with controlling this spongy moth, because I really don't want to lose the oaks.
And what was your address? Your address?
7 Lincoln Avenue.
On Lincoln? Okay.
On Lincoln, yeah.
Great. Okay. Great.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was outside of where the testing area is.
Yeah, we saw them there.
Down the river.
Yeah. And they're in the triangle as well, in the terrace area. So. Okay, was anybody else? No, okay. We have no consent agenda, so that'll take us right to our agenda items. So that'll be item A, if we could have a motion.
I'll move to approve a resolution authorizing the village administrator to enter into an agreement with Hendrickson Flying Services, Inc. of Rochelle, Illinois, to complete 2 aerial applications of BTK to eradicate spongy moth caterpillars in the village of East Dundee in the amount of $52,400.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Anybody have any questions or?
Phil, I would love to have addressed some of the questions that were raised in the, I want to make sure everybody's questions get answered. So I realized that the map of the spray zone is in the packet for today. Sorry, I'm making eye contact just through your arm. It's in the packet that was posted online today. The map is in there. But Phil, could you I know that we've talked about this a few times, could you detail some of the other methods that have been tried and discussed and just, kind of why we have settled on using BTK?
BTK, according to all of my research, the Department of Agriculture is I think primarily because of the extent and substantial infestations that we have here in East Dundee, that is the most effective means, really the only means, to eradicate this caterpillar, this moth species from East Dundee. There's a possibility of trunk injections, tree trunk injections, but the U.S., according to the Department of Agriculture, there's no science, and according through the Illinois Department of Agriculture indicates that the U.S. Forest Service indicates that there's no science to show that that is an effective means for treating this moth species. I think because we're talking about very large mature trees and the height of these trees, to effectively eradicate this moth species both from the top to the bottom, this spray event is really the only means of truly capturing all possible ways to eradicate this moth from top to bottom.
Additionally, Phil, you mentioned, it's been talked about that last year we did try these traps with the wrapping and that sort of thing, right?
That's not really intended to eradicate the moth.
No.
It kind of slows its
Right. But I'm just saying that it was implemented, and it hasn't been effective in stopping them from coming back.
It may have an impact, not in terms of eradicating the moth, but it'll help slow the moth's movement up and down the tree to the canopy and back down. But it'll, as far as killing the moth species and eradicating it, no, it will not have a substantial impact.
Right.
Every tree in the village would essentially have to be wrapped. And same with the trunk injections. Every tree would have to be injected in town for this to fully, and again, the trunk injections, there's no science to support that is an effective means anyway.
How many trees?
All insects too, all insects. The injections bad.
Oh. How many trees were wrapped that we tried?
They were all done on a private level, so it's hard to know
Got it.
exactly how many.
We wrapped 22.
You did 22.
And there were a handful in the terrace that wrapped their trees, but we didn't conduct a formal count on how many were wrapped.
By the time a lot of this came to light, and what was going on and noticing it, we were kind of almost past the height of being able to act on it and wrap our individual trees in our yards and act on it in a way that would have been meaningful. So that was part. Had I known then what I know now, during this period of time, it would have been different. But I think what you're trying to get to, Trustee Kunze, is that there were the counts taken in various areas in the village. It did show that there was a substantial infestation within the village. And then we also experienced quite a bit of defoliation, and to the point of, I think it was Doug's comment about, 2 to 3 years of 100% defoliation. We're hearing different things from different people, and it all depends on the health of the tree and the age of the tree. So we've got I personally have a very young oak tree in my yard, as well as some old ones, and they attack both. So, and lost canopy in both extremes of the age and the health of the trees. So the older ones are gonna have less.
And some infestations were observed on non-oaks.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
They're spreading.
And pine trees, if they infest pine trees, pine trees can't recover, is the understanding that we've been hearing from some of our other naturalists in the area as well.
I have a question for Dave, was it? After the spraying at Randall in 2009, 2010, did you see other species come back to those trees?
Did I see?
Other species, caterpillars, and come back to those
Oh,
trees?
yes.
Like,
Yeah.
it didn't eradicate the life of all 500 species, but just from your observation?
That's correct.
And then, Dave, I also had a question for you. Sorry. Now that I know your name, did you have any, I know spraying in a park is going to be different than spraying in a residential area, but were you marking or putting up signs that you were doing this, the spraying
That's a good
application?
question, because I was not here. I had
Okay.
left Dundee back in the mid-'90s and then came
Okay.
back in '14. Frank, I don't know if you recall that process?
I don't, but Mark said it was during the morning hours on a weekday, so I don't know that there'd be a lot of people in the park to begin with at that time of day. But they did say that Mark Simon, our park superintendent, and Mike Sprouse, our superintendent of the golf course, said that it was definitely done by a helicopter.
And Phil, can you talk to what the plan, sorry, we keep playing musical chairs, I apologize. Phil, can you talk to what the plan is for us for notifying if we go through with this process?
Yes, we are subject to a public notice requirement, so we will make every effort to notify all residents and businesses in town of the spraying. We'll implement a public information campaign in every way possible, social media. We can, and that's a requirement per the FAA and so on and so forth. And the flying service will provide us with a public notice that they have used or that other communities have used in their residential areas for our situation here.
Okay.
And I wanted, if I could go back to Trustee Saviano's question, you had asked about, I had talked to the Department of Agriculture and they indicated that moth species, the spongy moth will typically not repopulate itself unless it's human activity or wind, but other moth species will repopulate over time. So if there is an impact with this spray event with other non-spongy moth species, they will repopulate over time.
And also, Phil, can you go into a little bit more detail about the timing of when a spray event would take place?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So in talking to the flying service, the earliest that they've ever sprayed is April 30th, the very end of April. Typically, the earliest is around mid-May, and that's a function of the type of spring that we're having. So the sooner the leaf out on the trees and the moth or the caterpillar development, they want to catch that as quickly and early as possible. So it's hard to tell exactly when in May. I don't anticipate it being late April, but it's certainly possible.
Okay.
More likely early May. The time of day would be an early morning spray, typically between 6 and 10 a.m.
Okay.
Trying to get some notes here. Early a.m. Wind speeds would have to be less than 10 miles per hour, so it's dependent upon the weather conditions. Certainly don't want to, won't occur during a rainy period on a rainy day or a windy day. We typically like lower temperatures as well. So.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Is there any other comments? Anybody have anything else? No? Okay, Franco?
Trustee Britton?
Yes.
Trustee Saviano?
Yes.
Trustee Triber?
Yes.
Trustee Souter?
Yes.
Trustee Mahoney?
Yes.
Trustee Coonsey?
Yes.
Okay, that'll take us to reports. I don't know if anybody's had any. Andy, you want to start us?
No report.
Trish?
No report.
Rich?
No report.
Scott?
No report.
Kathleen?
I'm gonna break
It's
the
okay.
run here. I just wanted to thank all the people of East Dundee in showing up to the polls yesterday. East Dundee showed up in a big way. 27.7% of the registered voters voted, as compared to the Kane County average of 16.6%. So I think, everybody was able, that wanted to, was able to share their voice, and they did so in a big way. That's all I have.
Okay, Sarah?
No report.
Kelly?
No report.
Brandis?
No report.
Phil? Okay, I've got nothing either. So we don't have an executive session, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn. Second.
All right. All in favor? Or
Either voice vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right. Thank you all for coming. Have a good evening.
Turn off next meeting.